Good afternoon, everyone. Our online session today promises to dispel a deeply ingrained fact: self-doubt should be ignored. And who better to take this challenge than our guest of honor, Margie Warrell. Welcome to our forum, Margie. And thank you for making it.
Yeah.
We are all eager to know how we can leverage self-doubt. And I would like to begin by introducing you to our mentors, Mr. Dhanuka, you've already met, and Mr. Sanjay Bhuwania, who dispelled our self-doubt when it came to investing in stock markets. Women and investing don't normally go hand in hand, but our mentors achieved this feat through our 28-year-old organization, Millennium Mams. This event is a part of a literary initiative, Suryodaya, and I thank my mentors for their invaluable contribution. Well, Margie, you've literally been there, done that. And when you're not reaching the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, you are swimming with piranhas, or maybe coaching Fortune 500 companies. Amidst all this, you are writing bestsellers like You've Got This and challenging the perception of self-doubt. You've given a new meaning to time management, I would say.
I'm not sure about that.
Margie's international experience has found her working with diverse organizations from NASA, Google, United Nations Foundation to British Telecom, Berkshire Hathaway, and Australian Federal Police. Her insights have also been shaped by her work and interviews with leaders such as Richard Branson, Bill Marriott, Australian Prime Minister John Howard, Oliver Stone, and author Marianne Williamson. We don't have a doubt in our mind that our session today will be nothing like we've seen before, and we will make self-doubt our ally. So let us all give a big hand for Margie Warrell. And Margie, I would say it's a big honor to have you today with us. And to kickstart the session, I would like to request you to say a few words, on what was your motivation and your life lessons you've had all throughout. So I would request you to please come in.
Well, where to start? But yes, hello everybody, and thank you for giving up an hour of your weekend, your Saturday, to join me in conversation here about self-doubt. So yes, I grew up on a dairy farm in rural Australia, Southeast Australia. One of 7 children. My father milked cows for 50 years to raise 7 children. My mother worked just with raising children. So I grew up in a rural environment. No one had finished high school where I grew up, where I was. My parents hadn't. So it wasn't an overly, obviously Australia is a very different country than India, but it was a very rural area and not particularly sophisticated. And growing up, I honestly, my horizons for myself didn't extend very far as to what I could do. I didn't know anyone who was professional. I didn't know any professional women, except the teacher at our school who had trained as a teacher, but that was it, So my own belief in my ability to do things in my adult life was fairly limited, to be honest. And so much of the work that I do now and the reason I write the books that I write is because I feel I've had to overcome that little voice in my head. And if you have a voice in your head that sometimes says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not experienced enough, then you'll know what I'm talking about. This little voice of doubt, like that you're not that good, you're not that smart, you're not that educated, you're not that pretty, you're not that, you name it. It was always talking. And I decided to go to university, to move to the city, which was kind of scary. I didn't know anyone in the city and I had to work jobs and to make ends meet. And all the time growing up, I've had to just learn to take action in the presence of my doubts, and not to let my doubts, you know, the voices. Put your hand up here near your camera if you sometimes have a voice in your head that makes you feel doubt. Who has that? Yeah. Yeah. We all have it. We all have it. But I think sometimes we women can have it sometimes more than men. It's not to say men don't have a voice of doubt. I just think that as women, because, and I appreciate you come from a different cultural context than me, and our cultures impact how we see ourselves. And I know within India, like what it is, and I don't know your culture as well as you do, but our family has a culture, and it impacts how we see ourselves, our identity. And I think for women, often we are not raised to believe in ourselves as much sometimes as men are. And so I think women can buy into a story about who they are and about what they can do and about what's possible that can hold us back, that can limit us. It's like we live in an invisible prison of our own making, in our own mind, because we buy into these beliefs and we treat the beliefs as though those beliefs are the truth, like that this is the truth. And actually it's just a story. It's just a doubt. And so, yeah, when I was growing up, I had a lot of those stories, those little voices, those doubts. And through my life, I've ended up living in different countries around the world, currently in Singapore, but I lived in America. I lived in Papua New Guinea in my 20s, just after I got married. I have been married for nearly 27 years. I know it seems such a long time, but and so, yes, so much of my work is really about helping people to be braver and not to let the doubt. If you think about driving a car, it's the self-doubt sits in the driver's seat and it just steers our lives whichever way, and about taking back the steering wheel and going, no, the doubt isn't going to steer my car. I'm going to steer my car. The highest part of me, that part of me that knows that I have a gift to share, that I have talents to share, that I have important work to do and a difference to make, a make to mark, that part of me, that highest part of me, that's what steers the car.
Wow, Margie. And I'm sure all of us have a lot of self-doubt, and everybody is like, they have a lot of questions to ask you. And so I would like to bring in Meghna, my colleague and vice president of this esteemed organization, to take it forward. Meghna, yes, over to you. So now you be on your toes and think on your feet. It's your turn, please.
Thank you, Rachna. And hello, Margie. It's wonderful to have you here at our forum. We all are super thrilled, and we've all read a lot of books and articles by you. We've got a lot of questions. So I'm going to start with the very first one. The subtitle of your new book, You've Got This, is The Life-Changing Power of Trusting Yourself. So why is trusting oneself life-changing? Could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah. Yes. So if you think about who are we as human beings? And I believe that who we are as human beings is not physical beings who have a spiritual experience, but we are ultimately spiritual beings having a physical experience. We live in these earth suits, our bodies, and they live for so long, and then we die. And when I say that trusting in ourselves, I'm talking about trusting in the power within us, and also which includes the power from the greater, from which we came, that we have within us the ability to do amazing things, to overcome amazing challenges, to find our way through difficult circumstances, and also to accomplish amazing things, big things, meaningful things. And so the opposite of self-trust is self-doubt. It's not trusting ourselves. It is buying into the fear and the doubt that we don't have that ability, that if something bad happens, that we won't cope. So when you believe that whatever happens, you can handle it, that no matter what problem you face, you have within you the power, the potential to rise to meet that challenge one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, it changes your life because it keeps us from living in fear. Because when we have that faith in ourselves, that self-trust, it's that inner faith, then actually that frees us from all of the anxiety and the worry of, what if this happens if I try this and I fail? What happens if this person rejects me? What happens if... It actually keeps us from living in a future worst case scenario, and we're able to get on with making the very most of the circumstances we are in right now. It allows us to be more creative. It allows us to be much more brave. It allows us to have more confidence and optimism. And that actually even has an impact on ourselves physiologically. Because we know that stress, anxiety, when all I do is stress and go, what if this happens, this terrible thing happens? Actually, that stress manifests in the body, and we can get sick. It impacts our immune function. And so living from a place of fear and anxiety, which is what a lack of trust stokes within us, can be very debilitating. Whereas when we live with self-trust, I can trust that whatever the future holds, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's coming. I can't control it all. But I'm going to work towards something that's meaningful to me, that really lines up with what I feel called to do and who I feel called to be, with that higher spiritual calling that I have, that I have everything it takes and I will prevail and it will be okay. And that is life-changing. That transforms our experience of being alive in the world. It doesn't mean it changes all the circumstances around us, but it shifts our relationship to our circumstances, to our situation. As you know, right now, I know in India, everywhere, we're all having our lives disrupted from this virus. Absolutely. Our circumstances are not the way we want them to be. My circumstance is not the way I want it to be. I am sure all of you are dealing with situations that are not the way you want them to be. And in fact, some of us are dealing with loss and heartache and hardship and financial hardship. And yet if we operate from a place of courage, of self-trust, of faith, that actually allows us to deal with those circumstances in a very different way and to be at peace with them versus fighting them. And that is life-changing.
Wow, that was beautifully explained and very empowering, Margie. And in fact, I know you speak from experience because I read that you were evacuated from a bushfire, and you've also recently dealt with your spouse recovering from COVID. So it's amazing how you've been so positive, Margie.
Yeah, it's been quite the year, 2020, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you don't have to have been evacuated. I was back in Australia at Christmas with my family. We all come together at Christmas time. It's a tradition. I'm from a big family, and all my siblings and yes, we all had to evacuate because the fires were really, really, really bad and threatening. And we were fortunate that nothing was destroyed of my family property, but many, many people did lose a lot. But we were okay. And then, of course, my husband contracted COVID in March and ended up in hospital and in quarantine for a month. Actually, I found out this morning that my oldest son has COVID. I've learned that this morning when I woke up. He sent me a message because he's in America. And my daughter has had COVID. And so I have well and truly also been impacted by this virus. And a lot of my work has been impacted and many things. And yet I very much choose to live from a place that every challenge, every hardship, every heartache, every adversity holds within it the seed of a greater good. But we have to look for the seed. We have to water the seed. We have to wait patiently while the seed grows. And sometimes that can take a long time. But that actually that sometimes the most difficult circumstances are the ones that actually hold the seed of the greatest benefit for us individually, for as a family, as a community, as a country, as a world, like as a catalyst for good, as a catalyst for good. But we have to have an active role in that. And we cannot turn that seed into something good if all we do is look at the bad. If all we do is complain, if all we do is blame, if all we do is feel self-pity, it's really easy to feel self-pity. I know it is, but self-pity doesn't move us to looking for good and doing good. And that's why I think our mindset, how we approach things, is so important. And when my husband was diagnosed, and my son is fine, my son is feeling fine. I just want to say that my son feels absolutely fine. In fact, he is asymptomatic generally. His girlfriend tested positive, and then when he got a test, and he's positive too. But when my husband got sick, he wasn't feeling as well, and I was quite anxious for a few days. Right. And I just had to sit there, and as I wrote in You've Got This, it is in vulnerability we find our greatest strength. And I felt very vulnerable. I felt anxious. I felt overwhelmed. He was in hospital. He wasn't able to communicate with me. It was very hard to communicate and hear from him. And I just really felt that. I felt like there was a car parked on my chest for just a few days. But I also grounded myself in, and I wrote about this in You've Got This, in what I call self-certainty. What do I know for sure? What I know for sure is that I'm okay. What I know for sure is I can handle anything. What I know for sure is my husband is a strong man, and his body will be strong in fighting this. And that I want to use this for a purpose that's bigger than myself. And it's from that place, like when the storms blow, trees grow deeper roots. Yes. When we're dealing with storms, and we're all dealing with a bit of a storm right now, a global storm. Yes. We have to put down deeper roots. And so ground yourself in what you know is true and certain. And you can always be certain that you have the ability and how you respond to things. And that actually helped me respond in a very purposeful, powerful, and positive way. And I think that helped me ride through it all better. Yeah.
I'm getting goosebumps just listening to all that you've gone through and how you rode through the entire thing and all the storms. I'm sure all of us here are really getting empowered hearing this. So thank you for that, Margie. And now I'd like to get in Sonali Chandak for the next question. She is the coordinator of our Suryoday group. Sonali, please come in.
In line, life storms introduce us to ourselves in ways that calm water never do. I love these lines from your column. Could you tell us more on this, please?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing that.
Yes, her network was a bit bad. Sonali, can you just repeat it?
Yeah. Life storms introduce us to ourselves in ways that calm water never do.
Yeah.
I love these lines from your column, Margie. Could you tell us more on this?
Yes, I would love to talk to you more on that. That really, at the underlying truth of that, what you just read out, is that adversity introduces us to our deeper selves, to our higher selves, and to the truth of who we really are. So when life is going along easily, when everything is going our way and we can live life very carefree, we don't have to think about much, we have everything we need, we have all the money we need, everyone's doing what we like, and everything is going our way, we are not compelled to look within ourselves very much. And it's very easy to live a very largely superficial life and a very comfortable life. And we actually are not forced sometimes to look within ourselves and discover who we really are. We don't have to, because life doesn't call us to. But in adversity, we are forced to look deeper within ourselves. sometimes we're forced to have to be a lot stronger than we want to be, to have to be a lot braver than we want to be, to have to be much more resilient than we want to be more resourceful, to suddenly kind of go, okay, what do I need to do here to make this work? That we don't have to when we have everything we want. I think one of the gifts of my childhood, we grew up without any very, very little money. We grew our own cows. We milked our own cows. We had milk. We grew our own vegetables. But we had very little money, and I had to work really hard through university to make money. And I've always had to work hard to make money. And I think about what a gift that's been to me, because I've learned to value money and to spend money thoughtfully and carefully. And so when this storm has blown in, I have money put aside and we will figure it out, and to teach my children how important it is to be careful with money. But I think about that through a lens of what a gift that is. And some people don't learn that gift because they always had lots of money. So I always think, what a gift it is to have not grown up with money. Because in adversity, we didn't have very much money. Likewise, over the years, I lost my youngest brother had a mental illness, a very bad mental illness. And he struggled with schizophrenia for many years, for 10 years. And he got sicker and sicker over 10 years. And he eventually took his life. And it was very, very sad for our family. For 10 years, it was very sad because he had been so smart and so bright and so funny and so athletic. And when he died, it was very sad. But I remember in the aftermath of that, and I wrote about that story in You've Got This. I prayed to God. I'm like, God, why did this happen? It was so sad. There's not like it didn't turn out well. It wasn't a happy ending. My parents had been so heartbroken, and they have a lot of faith. They're very strong Christians, and I was like, God, how can this bad thing happen? And I remember in the journal, I wrote in my journal a lot. I love to journal, and I think journaling is a very powerful tool. And I just remember what I ultimately got out of that was just a deepened commitment to making sure I lived my life, because I have been blessed with good mental health. How can I live my life in a way that honors the life he didn't live? How can I live my life in a way that helps those who are struggling with their own hardships and heartaches to live more meaningful lives? How can I use that tragedy in a difficult way? And I actually found strength in the sadness of that. And so, life storms, yes, they often can make us discover within ourselves strength, but also purpose, a sense of purpose that we may never tap into otherwise. And I never envy someone whose life is really easy. I never envy anyone who's had everything they wanted, and people who are born, and those born into real privilege can actually be pretty unhappy people unless they can find a meaningful way to use their privilege. And so I think that's where I think we have to be so careful that we don't live comfortable lives, but actually we live meaningful lives.
Wow, thank you. That was really inspiring. Thank you.
Yes, Margie, definitely leading more meaningful lives makes so much sense. It's very thought-provoking. Thank you for that. And I'd like to bring in Sirisha for the next question, please.
Good afternoon, Margie. I noticed that you travel a lot. So could you please share your experiences as to how traveling has taught you in finding your purpose and in your belief system?
Yeah. I usually travel a lot, and I haven't gone anywhere now for 4 months, which is strange for me. Yeah, but I backpacked I spent a couple of years backpacking around the world when I was 21, 22. And then I've done a lot of travel since, but that was sort of very, very, very earthy travel, as it just backpacking and staying in very, very inexpensive places and things. And that taught me a lot in my early 20s, because I got some really diverse experiences, and traveling through Africa and the Middle East and India and Thailand and, and many places. And it taught me a lot about human nature. So one, it taught me a lot about cultures, like how much our cultures can be so different. And yet it also taught me a lot about how we are much more similar than we are different. I mean, we're very different. We've got different personalities and we're shaped by different cultures. So growing up in a strict Hindu home will be very different than me growing up in New Delhi, than a rural farm Catholic family in rural Australia, right? We're going to be different. But actually, when you really peel back the layers of people and you really get to know people, underneath all of that, there's so much more that connects us and we have in common than we don't. But we often project onto people, oh, I'm nothing like them because they're a different color, they have a different religion, they believe something different to me, or they have different customs. And actually, when you get to know people, we're less different. But also, I think that was a huge thing that I got from that. I don't know that in that point in time, I was getting a huge sense of purpose from it. I was just finding it expanded my worldview. Live with the view of the culture that you're from and think this is how it is. And it made me go, this is how, the way I think it is just shaped by my upbringing. And there's so many ways to experience the world. And so I tend to be very, very open-minded. And so it's made me much more open-minded. And I love meeting people who are different. I love going to people from different religions to their houses of worship or their children's weddings and experiencing a bar mitzvah because I'm like, oh, I've never experienced that. I'd love to go to a Hindu wedding. I love to have different experiences because they're so interesting. And so I think it's just whet my appetite and desire to be around people and diversity of people too.
Thank you, Margie. I'd now like to call upon Suchi for the next question, please.
Hello, Margie.
Hello.
So I read a quote somewhere that you are confined only by the walls you create yourself. So easier said than done. And how do we really remove these inhibitions or the walls that we create for ourselves? And does self-talk help in this?
Yes. So in You've Got This, I actually go through a series of questions to ask yourself. And we often don't know that we don't, like a fish doesn't know it's in water. It just, because that's just all it knows. So we don't even know we're in a prison. If you don't know it's invisible. But often we are living inside a prison of our own making based on what we tell ourselves is true. Like, I can never do that. I'm not good at that. I can never be something. Or those people, no one like this likes me. Or, or I'm not a morning person. And we treat those things and they become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so I encourage people to challenge what they tell themselves. And of course, we can't challenge everything we tell ourselves, but to recognize what you tell yourself isn't the truth. It's just what you tell yourself. So you might think, oh, I'm not that pretty, or I'm too, and it's like, who says? I mean, by what measure? Or I can't make money, or I'm never going to be good at investing in the stock market. Who says? Just because you haven't done it till now doesn't mean you can't learn and you can't get better at it. So challenging what you tell yourself, asking yourself, if I keep this belief, if I let this belief dictate my actions, how will my life be 1 year from now or 5 years from now? And am I happy with that? And if you're happy with that, okay, good. But if you're not happy with that, then ask yourself, what's the price that you're paying by holding on to that belief? And what's another belief you could have instead? And so I grew up thinking I couldn't run. I'm just not very athletic. My father always said I was very uncoordinated. And then I was in my 30s and I was in an exercise class at 6 o'clock in the morning, even in the snow, living in North America. And I started to realize, oh, I can run. I just always had bought into a belief that I wasn't very athletic and I would never be very athletic. I could never run very far. And then I realized that was just it was a prison I had caged myself into. And because if you tell yourself you can't, you're not going to try. And so I encourage people, whenever you're not feeling purposeful, powerful, positive, or peaceful about something, those 4 P's, then ask yourself, what is it I'm telling myself here? How do I know that's true? If I hold on to this belief, what will my future look like? What's another belief I could tell myself? If I live from that belief, what actions would I take? And what emotions would I feel? And so it's very important for all of us to challenge the story that we're telling ourselves all the time, particularly if you're feeling anxious and stressed out. Ask yourself, what is it I'm telling myself that's making me so anxious and stressed out? What is it that's making me feel so lacking confidence or belief in myself? What else could I tell myself? And literally try on other self-talk. What's another narrative, another story I could create?
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Our wrong belief systems hold us back. That is very powerful what you pointed out, Margie. And now I'd like to call in Deepika. She's our member from Bangalore chapter. Deepika, please come in.
Hi, Margie. So I was wondering, have you ever read Gandhi books, Mahatma Gandhi's books, and have you been inspired by any of his sayings or thoughts?
I think everybody has been inspired by his sayings. And the one that I have lived from the most is be the change you want to see in the world. He also talked about forgiveness and how forgiveness is only the brave, the courageous can really forgive. Holding on to anger is easy. But yeah, he has inspired me because he was, to me, a truly noble man who truly walked the brave and courageous path and lived his life in service of a cause far, far, far greater than himself. He was a champion of justice and true to his values in every way, even at great cost to himself, as you know. So I have been very inspired by him. I like to study figures from history who are noble people, and to me he's a noble man, and obviously there are many people like that, but he is obviously someone who has inspired many. Mother Teresa is someone who has inspired me enormously, and Mandela. I mean, obviously there are many people in history, but I think it's good because it's easy to just assume that they're somehow different than us, that they're made of something different, that somehow they just came out different, and actually they're just human beings. He was just a man. He was just a man. He just chose he was just very clear in the choices that he would make, and he was a very deeply thoughtful man. But all of us can be deeply thoughtful people. We just have to choose to be. So the only thing that gets in the way of us living a life of nobility like him is the choice we make.
True. That's really true. Thank you so much.
I'd like to call in Priya for the next question, please. Priya, are you there?
Yes. I'm sorry. So Margie, I've been really inspired by how you're saying that we should let go of these walls that we have created, and ask myself this question and realize that I've always been an aspirant writer, and I feel that, you know, these voices saying that I haven't been trained or professionally, I have not been there. So how did you start as a writer? And can you give us some pointers?
Yeah, I'm probably a good person to talk to about this, because I come from such an humble, unqualified beginning as a writer. So, and I remember so clearly having to overcome my doubt, and my husband encouraged me. So I went to a small school that had about 13 or 15 children in the whole school. Until I was at 13, I went to a bigger school, but up until then, so I didn't have training in one teacher. It was not I always never even knew where apostrophes went. I just didn't get grounded in the basics of writing and English grammar. I mean, I could speak it fine, but I really didn't know the rules. And I went through, I went through school, I was fine, but I wasn't someone who was an English major. I never wanted to be an author, actually. There was never an aspiration. I never studied writing. I never studied literature. In my family, we didn't have many books. So I felt very, very, very unqualified and had lots of reasons why not to write a book, why I shouldn't aspire to be an author. I mean, all of those reasons there, are pretty good reasons. And you could argue they were pretty good reasons. And I remember when I started out doing coaching, and my sister said, "Oh, Margie, maybe you should write a book." I wrote a newsletter. I would email people on a newsletter that people could sign up for on my website. And I encourage you to sign up for it. And I said, "Oh, I can't write a book. I mean, who am I? I never studied writing. What do I know about writing?" But I was very passionate about the message that I wanted to share. And I remember saying to my husband, I had 4 children under the age of 7. I was living in America at the time, and I said, "Oh, I'm only 37 or 38. I'm young. I don't have a PhD or a master's. I haven't ever studied writing. No one knows me. It's like I'm famous. And I just, who am I to write a book?" And my husband said to me, "Honey, what you have to say is helpful to people. One day, when you're old and you have all the answers to all of the problems of the world, you can write another book. But why don't you just write the best book you can right now? Just the best book you can right now at age 37 with 4 kids under 7, without knowing all the answers to all the world's problems." And it shifted my perspective, and it gave me permission to just write the best book I could write. Not to write the next Harry Potter, not to be Maya Angelou, not to be someone who would sell a zillion, 1,000 million copies, and not to be Shakespeare, but just to write the best book that I could write. And I think, oh yeah, here it is. So this is the book. I wrote this book called Find Your Courage. And I took about 1.5 years. I would write it when my kids were napping in the afternoon. And I self-published it because no one was going to publish it. And then I sent it off to publishing houses and said, "Would you like to publish this book for me?" And got lots of rejections. And then after 6 months, I got a letter from a big publishing house in New York City saying, "We would like to buy the international rights to your book." And I didn't even think to negotiate. I just said, "Oh my gosh, that would be so exciting." And the book then was coming out again in bookstores around the world. And it's called Find Your Courage. It was me finding my courage. And I remember before that book came out, I remember waking up in the middle of the night in like a nightmare. And in my mind, in my imagination, in my dream, was me on the front page of the New York Times with my photo. And it just said a big byline that just said, "World's Worst Author." And I share that with you because I was terrified that if I wrote a book, people would say, "You are the worst writer the world has ever known." And it didn't become a New York Times bestseller, but I think it's now in 5 languages. And I share that with you because I think you have to give yourself permission to not be the world's most brilliant writer. Don't try and write the most amazing book the world has ever seen. Just try and write the best book that you can right now. Give yourself permission. And I wrote about this in You've Got This. Give yourself permission to write a really lousy first draft. And then after you've written a really lousy first draft, you'll write a little bit less lousy second draft. And after your lousy second draft, you'll probably write an average, okay, third draft. And then you're on your way to something that's okay. But you've got to give yourself permission not to be a Shakespearean brilliant writer. And And like some people really are called to be writers, like they're called to be Elizabeth Gilbert or someone. They're just like, that's what they love, words, they live in words. And I have got a lot better. You've Got This is my 5th book, and it is my best book. I'm a much better writer now than I was how many years ago? 15 years ago when I started writing my first book. I'm a much, much better writer. But I've only got to be a better writer by being an average writer. And so you may be a far better writer than me already. And I believe this for every one of you, whatever you want to do, give yourself permission not to be brilliant before you start. Give yourself permission to be average, and then give yourself permission to get better at it as you go.
That is so powerful, Margie. Thank you so much. I think now a lot of people are going to shed their inhibitions and give themselves permission. And now I'd like to call in our President Rachna for her question. Rachna.
Margie, I would like to ask you about your adventure. Because what I would say that your adventures are extreme in nature. Like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with 4 teenage children. Like it's something. What motivates you? Like, how do you give yourself permission to do this?
Yeah, well, that's a bit like writing a book, because I have never trained in mountain climbing. So, part of what motivated that. So my husband was turning 50, and I said to him, I forgot his 49th birthday. So I felt I needed to make it up on his 50th. And I said to him, what would you like to do? He said, oh, it would be great to do a safari in Africa. And then one of my children said, oh, but wouldn't it be cool to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? And we're like, yeah, but it's really high. And we lived at sea level in Melbourne, Australia. We didn't climb mountains for fun. We didn't ever go to altitude. But what was actually that inspired it was the idea that our family would do this together as an undertaking, like that we would do this something, it would just be a really cool thing to do, that we would mark my husband's birthday in it seemed like a really cool way to do it. And we were aware that you can't always get to the top of the mountain. Some people have very bad altitude sickness and they can't make it. But we just wanted to give ourselves the chance to do it. And so my kids were enthusiastic, some of them more enthusiastic than others, but we just thought it would be a really cool thing to do as a family. And so we all bought into the vision that for the rest of our lives, if we did this, we would always say, wasn't that a really amazing family experience together? And you know what? It absolutely was. It was actually really difficult. Way more difficult than I had realized. It was extremely hard. I can't overstate how hard I found it, but we did it. We actually got there. And so many times the day that we were going to the summit, I think the summit's about 5,000 meters, or is it 6,000? It's really high. I can't remember, but it's very high. But it was very hard. I felt very nauseous. I had a headache. I was vomiting. It was really brutal day, 9 hours of just going very steep up. But I didn't want to be the one that bailed and said, oh, it's all too hard. And then we finally got to the top. But that really, I'm not usually, I enjoy being active, but I'm not someone, I never want to climb another mountain as high as that again. But I enjoy doing, I enjoy adventure holidays with my family. Like we always, we go whitewater rafting and I have 3 boys who are all active. And honestly, the last holiday in the world they want is to sit at a 5-star resort by a pool. Like they would say that is the most boring holiday they could think of. So my daughter would be all for that. But I have 3 boys who really like to be physical. So yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing.
I'd like to call in Chetna for the next question, please.
Hi, Margie. This session is really wow, and you are also wow. Margie, my question is, how would you define meaningful things, and how would you define a meaningful life? Is it different for different people, or there are common characteristics to meaningful?
What is meaning? Obviously, we are all different, and we all draw meaning from different things. Nearly everyone, I would say everyone, draws meaning from relationships. So our relationships provide meaning to us. We draw meaning from service, doing things that are in service of others. But that may be, for some, it may be creating artwork that is an expression in the world that adds beauty to the world. And for someone else, that might be it might be it might be something very different. But I think often our purpose, and I look at this, sits at the intersection of where we have a natural strength or talent, something we bring, with something that we have an interest in, that we have a passion for, that we care about. Sometimes it's a cause. It might be like social justice cause. And then something that the world needs, something that is of value that we feel contributes to the world in a meaningful way. And often, so for some people, raising children, I want to be a mother. I love being a mother, and the world needs children who are well-rounded, who will make the world a better place. So some people find motherhood fills everything they need in terms of meaning. But some people go, no, that's great, but I want something else as well. So I think it's different. Some people are much more motivated by accomplishment. They want to achieve things. They want to build the business. They want to make money. They want to build the business. They want to, and other people don't have to be doing that in order for them to get meaning. So I think we derive meaning in different ways, but I absolutely believe that for us to thrive as humans, and the research shows, we need to be working toward meaningful outcomes, toward meaningful aspirations. Some people may want to run a business, a global empire, and for other people it might be looking after preschool children or teaching, and others it may be gardening. They love to do landscape gardening. So, I mean, like I always think, thank goodness some people are drawn to be vets or to be nurses. I could not stand being a nurse. I couldn't stand being a vet. I think it's noble. I think it's wonderful. It's just, I wouldn't want to do it. And what I love, as I've met people all around the world in my travels and in my work, I love that I meet people who get lit up by things that I have absolutely no desire for. Right now, there are people who just love, who are trying to find a vaccine for COVID-19. But their whole careers have been working in, pharmacology. I have no desire for that. But I meet people who could tell me all day about how excited they are about trying to find my father-in-law used to get so excited about measurement accounting. How do you measure accounting standards? And he used to talk about it to the point that I would go to sleep. It was so boring to me, but he thought it was so interesting. It was so meaningful to him. And so I think for everybody, whatever ignites your interest, whatever ignites for you a little flame inside you, and you go, oh, I love that. It doesn't matter if no one else likes it. It doesn't matter at all that no one else likes it. It matters that it makes you feel more alive. And I believe all of us have a light within us. We all have a flame. And some people's gets turned down so low, and then it gets covered over, and they disconnect from it. It's always there. It is always there, but we can become disconnected from it. And I think our job in the world is to look for what is it that lights me up, to fan that flame within us. I love travel. I love being with people. I miss being with people right now. I miss my work of being in a room with 100 women. And, I would love to be with you all in person right now. It would be wonderful. But in the meantime, we're here on Zoom. Thank goodness for technology. But are there other people who say, oh, Margie, I couldn't think of anything worse than standing in front of a group of people. But they might love to be coaches or they're counselors, but they like to do things one-on-one. And I think there's no right and wrong. And so just what is it that you love to do? What is it that makes you feel more alive? And find that thing and do more of that thing, whatever that is. And don't worry about whether other people might enjoy it. And don't worry about if it looks stupid. And then as you move toward it, sometimes as we move towards something, we go, I thought when I started my second career, I started my first career in business, in corporates. I thought I wanted to be a coach and coach people one-on-one. That was my vision, was to have lots of coaching clients. And then I started getting coaching clients, and I would also speak at things, and I realized, oh, I don't want to work with people one-on-one. I love working I don't mind doing a little bit, but I also love being with groups of people. That lights me up more. I'm happy to write books. I enjoy that, but I wouldn't want to only write books because I love being with people. And so I love combination. I love variety, but I also meet people who are therapists or counselors or coaches, and they are in their element one-on-one with someone. So I think that it's just really figuring out what is it that aligns with who you are and your strengths and your gifts and your personality and your passion, and how that eases suffering in the world and brings more joy.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
That was beautifully explained, Margie. I'd now like to call upon Jyoti Vadhwa with her question, please.
Namaste, Margie.
Namaste.
Namaste. I would like to know, you spoke on the higher spiritual self. Higher spiritual self. Can you hear me rightly? Yes?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So, as you explained very nicely so far, but still I would like to know a little bit more to raise your higher spiritual self very alive in me. Sometimes I feel that I am not hearing the voice in me very loud and clear, which is there. So what are the ways to get out of it?
Well, I feel asking a question like that, I feel very humble, because I know there are many spiritual masters in the world, and I do not put myself remotely in their category. But I know myself that when I get quiet and I tune in, that I connect to that higher self, to that voice, for me, the voice of God. And that takes spiritual practices. And I think there are many pathways, and there are many practices, and there are many spiritual traditions. And I actually believe there is no one, there is many. And I think that connecting to that, the spiritual dimension of who we are, is vital for us to live our best and bravest lives. And coming back full circle to the opening question, to truly trust in ourselves means trusting in a power that's greater than ourselves, and tapping into a wisdom that's greater than our intelligence, but bigger than that. And I share my own practices in You've Got This, and I share my journal entries in there too. I journal a lot. And I often pray to God. I say, God, what do you want me to know? And my pen just writes back. And I believe I'm just channeling a higher wisdom, a higher source of intelligence than my own when I do that. And I've been doing that for many years. So it's a fairly developed practice. Obviously, in India, I mean, many people go and stay in an ashram and spend many, many hours meditating. And I have never done that. I've never done that. I've always been too busy raising 4 children and other things. I'm sure that is a very powerful spiritual experience. Some people fast. Music connects me. Actually, when I listen to beautiful, for me, very beautiful Christian music, but other music as well, that just connects me to, that higher self. So being in nature, I find being in nature a powerful tonic for the soul. And sitting in a place I live in an apartment in Singapore, but just out my window, you can't see right now, but I'm looking at at coconut trees, and I'm looking, there's a jungle nearby, and I just sit there in the morning with a cup of tea and I look at the jungle and I hear the birds, and to me that is just connecting in that place. So I think it's really important for all of us to find practices that work for us. And there's different styles of meditation. Yoga, obviously, for some, it hasn't been something that I have been able to get into myself, but I know many people do. So I just think try things, find things, but also hugely important is to prioritize time for it. And for me, starting my day connecting to that place of spirit, connecting to at a spiritual level, who am I going to be today? How may I best serve today? That is such an important grounding way for me to start my day. And I try and do that nearly every day. And it's very important. So yes, that's my answer. And I would just encourage you to prioritize that in your day and to get up earlier than you would. Set the alarm an extra half hour early, and just make that time. To me, it's sacred time. And when I spend that sacred time connecting into that place, it helps me with everything else. I yell at my kids less. I have more clarity in my work. I'm less overwhelmed. I'm less anxious. I'll be braver. Just it helps me get clarity about everything else.
Thank you so much. And this is the right path. And thank you so much. And our mentor, Mr. Dhanuka, we are having classes on this every day, and so grateful we are on the right path. Thank you so much.
Good. I will just mention, I got to interview Sri Ravi Shankar a few months ago for my podcast, my Live Brave podcast. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, you'll enjoy listening to my interview with him, because he is a spiritual master and has so much wisdom. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. So, but you will already know people. But I think to be a student of spiritual masters, people who've really dedicated their life to that. But thank you for asking.
Thank you so much.
And we shall all surely listen to this podcast that you mentioned, Margie. I'd now like to call upon Vanita Agarwal with her question, please.
Last question, right, Meghna?
Yeah.
Yes, last question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
I can.
Yeah, okay. Like, if you find your purpose in your life, should you live for it, or you should sacrifice for your family or kids? What should you do? Like, if you have your purpose in life, you should live for it, or sacrifice your family or kids, or you prioritize your family, kids?
Oh, good question. So if for example, I decided my purpose in life was to build wells in Africa, and I had 4 children at home and I left them all to fend for themselves, I would say that would be not living, that would be my purpose misguided, in that my number one responsibility at this stage of life is to care for these children. But maybe there's a way that I can be still honoring a sense of purpose without reneging on the responsibilities that I have right now. We must be responsible for our lives and responsible for those in our care. And our family, our children, very, very, obviously, very important that we are present for our children when they are young. So I absolutely would say, if you have children, you must be present for your children when they are young. That said, I do not believe that we need to shelve and put on a shelf those things that are tugging at our hearts just because we have children. We can still honor the purpose that we have, but without, they're not two different sides of the coin. We can, and in fact, I believe that we do our children a disservice if we are not working toward our highest purpose. But that doesn't mean that we renege on our responsibilities to children. So when my children were young, I literally, like my first book, I wrote it in nap time every day, an hour and a half in the afternoon when they were having an afternoon nap. And that's all I did. I didn't go out and talk. I never got on a plane. I never went anywhere. I just did that little thing. And I did that for years. And as they got older, I did more. And so for many years, maybe I wasn't spending more than 5 or 6 or 7 hours a week on my work that I felt really called to do because my children were young. And now my children are older and I work a lot, but I love my work. And I know my children are way better off for having had a mother who didn't sacrifice on the altar of motherhood martyrdom what she felt called to do. My children are so much better off that I have not just focused on being a good mother for 20. My oldest is 22. That I have actually, and so there's been times when I haven't been there for my children. There's been times when I have traveled away and I've missed going to their school concert, or I've missed a soccer game or a basketball game, or I've missed maybe missed a birthday or two. I can't remember, but maybe. But I've always said to them, like, they know they're number one, but that doesn't mean that there's not other things that sometimes take me away, particularly as they get older. And I also believe it's extremely important for us to raise self-reliant, independent children who know how to stand on their own 2 feet at 18. 18's my benchmark. And so how do I make sure my kids know how to cook and know how to put clothes in the washing machine and how to dry them so that if no one's around, they can figure it out themselves and put in their own application forms. And so over the years, taking the scaffolding away so that by the time they leave home, they need support, but they don't need, the scaffolding is being removed. So I think we do our children a disservice when we overparent them, when we are kind of helicopter and we're like, show me all your homework tonight. I want to see everything and let me reread it all before you hand it in. I don't think that serves our children. So I have always been, my children will always say, my mum never knew what homework assignments I had. And I'm like, yeah, I never knew. I'm like, guys, you need to do it or you'll fail. And that's going to suck for you. So I suggest you do it, but I'm not going to be managing all of that. So I have very independent children. And I think it's important. I've long said, how can we tell our children to go out and pursue their dreams if we aren't pursuing ours? But that doesn't mean we pursue them full time at 100 miles an hour. It means maybe we put aside an hour a week when we have 3 children under the age, little children. And maybe as they get older, we put aside 2 hours a week and then 5 hours a week and then 1 day a week. And then, so I think there's trade-offs. I will say there is always trade-offs. I've made trade-offs. I'm not on all the parent committees at school. I haven't been there at all the bake sales. I'm not the volunteer mother of the year. And I think as my kids have got older, my daughter, I remember saying when she was about 12 or 13, Mum, some of the other mums are always there and they always do these things and you're not. And then by the time she was 16 or 17 saying, I'm so proud that you have a career. I love that you have things, and so I would just encourage you to do something, but it doesn't have to mean that you have to it doesn't mean you sacrifice your family.
Wow. Margie, we have so many more questions by our members, but we know time is up. So I would like to wind up the session and cannot thank you enough. The number of life lessons we've taken away from you today, from adversity to right parenting. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to call upon our President Rachna Prasad for the vote of thanks, please.
Meghna, I agree. That was absolutely an impacting session, I would say. And I think it was a giveaway session today with so lot of, invaluable takeaways. Thank you so much for being there with us. And a big shout out to Margie. I suppose even a pandemic like COVID-19 salutes a warrior like Margie. And you have brushed aside the virus with the same indomitable spirit you fought against all odds to become a success story. You are such a big inspiration for us. You cannot imagine. And certainly it gives us the motivation to deal with the pandemic in the right spirit. We all wish you a greater adventure and a greater success. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Namaste to all of you. And I would say, I hope one day I will get to travel to India. I hope I get to meet some of you. When I was there as a backpacker when I was 21, I always thought I want to come back one day. So maybe one day I'll come back and we will see each other.
We'll launch your next book on a platform. Yes, sir. So would you like to come?
Yes. This is fantastic, madam. So spiritual and so practical.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored by you.
Thank you for being there.